Why are most bodybuilders, despite their bulging muscles and physical strength, actually weak people? Let's look at that. So I've spent 25 years in martial arts and strength training and have come to the conclusion that many of the people in both fields are hugely insecure. I've met some lovely people, certainly some good people, so let's be fair, but a fair share of people I would just describe as weak psychologically. As a resilience trainer who's worked in 6 different war zones, coached thousands of people, and even gave advice in the House of Lords on trauma, that impressed my mum, I've concluded that many people who are physically strong aren't psychologically strong. I've concluded that people who are physically strong are often less strong emotionally. This doesn't really make sense on the surface. You'd think you'd build psychological strength in a sort of stoic Nietzschean manner through building physical strength. So in this video, I'm going to give 3 reasons why this may be the case and what you can do about it. At the end, I'll say how you can make sure you're developing both physically and psychologically in the gym. All right, let's just start with sort of common sense, really. This is bad news. Most people aren't that impressed with the physical body that you build in the gym. Now, that's a little strange. You think it takes discipline, it takes hard work. Surely they can see the virtue in that. I think on one level people are, but there's a tension because people often understand that it comes from massive insecurity and compensation. This idea of compensatory function comes from psychology. I remember reading a martial arts paper on this years ago, that people are making up for something. Sometimes actually when you look at the sort of muscled gym bro, you can see this scared little boy on the inside who's compensating for that hugely. You know, I'm going to be honest, I can relate to this myself. I grew up in a house with an aggressive alcoholic dad, and I didn't want to be that weak child again, you know, so I dived into martial arts and then weightlifting as soon as I could, because I didn't want to feel vulnerable. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but we need to know that's what's driving us. She read a biography of the founders of modern day Aikido, that's Morihei Ueshiba, Jigoro Kano from Judo, and some guy whose name I can't pronounce, modern day karate founder. And all of them were either sick as kids or they saw their dads attacked as kids, and many, I think in 2 cases both. So the feeling of being weak oneself and seeing one's role model for strength, you know, your father is your model for God, as they say in Fight Club, attacked and the vulnerability of that as a child, and then they massively overcompensated with their martial arts careers, which again could be a good thing, but know if that's driving you. I mean, this comes up in other areas too, right? If you see a guy, I'm in America right now, these guys driving around in these big cars, and maybe they work on a farm, maybe it's necessary, but a lot of the times, what do we think? Small. That's what we think. As someone who works with resilience psychology, what I'd say here as well is it doesn't really work. So this is why it's a never-ending journey. People want to get bigger and bigger and bigger because they're trying to solve a problem with the wrong solution. They're trying to fill an unfillable hole. You know, that little kid in them is always going to be scared, even if they're big and muscly or, you know, hardcore combat person on the outside. Sean Strickland's another example of this, by the way, and I think, you know, he admitted this on Theo Vaughn where he broke down in tears, and I really respected him for being so honest. And he's a badass, I love him. But you can see it comes from that childhood of not wanting to be vulnerable. He's literally like UFC champion, and it's still not enough. So number 2, another type of psychological weakness that people see and don't really respect is it's just a bit immature, pursuing strength at all other costs. So I did another video on Rich Piana and travesty, which relates to this. If you see a little boy and he's like flexing his muscles, he's like, I want to be Superman, I want to be Spider-Man, I want to be strong. That's great for a 5-year-old. You're like, cool, you know, that's a developmentally appropriate, let's say. If you see an adult doing that, you've got to ask, what are their values at? Like, what are their priorities? Like, you want to be, you know, you want to take steroids and damage your health just so you can appeal to other men and be impress other dudes? I mean, it's just weird. So we're questioning their motivation, and you know what's weak for people there psychologically is their values and their emotional maturity. Third thing, and I think this is at the heart of kind of modern gym culture, is people are training for physicality, but they're not training holistically. They're not training to build virtue, the original Greek sense of arete, the original notion of a gymnasia, which was developed character as much as physicality. So they're just not training for psychological or emotional strength. There's no intentionality around that. Their training program is purely physical. Maybe they're not mindfully training. They're checked out watching TV or listening to something while training. So it's not really surprising they're not developing psychological or emotional strength because that's not the emphasis for them, right? So what can we do about this if we want to build some psychological and emotional strength in the gym? So first thing I'd say is have an intentionality around that, to follow on that point, say this is what I'm here for. That intentionality I think is so helpful. And from that follows how you train. And that, you know, for example, might mean training with intensity. There's a way in which you can build stoic resilience, more kind of emotional resilience from the intensity of that. And that's the whole process though. It's like, do I go when I'm feeling tired? Do I get up early to train? Do I put the weights back because I'm developing that virtue of consideration for others? You know, I was in the gym today and I kind of knew I'd get away with it. I was like, I can't be bothered. And I was like, no, that is not what I'm training for. You know, do I offer a spot to someone? Do I offer help to someone? The social virtues. These are things we can develop in the gym. So in terms of mental strength, absolutely mindfulness is a key foundation. I see more generally, like number 2, don't neglect other forms of supplementary psychological training. So what do I mean by that? Trauma therapy, normal therapy, regular therapy, mindfulness and meditation. You know, there's other forms of psychological therapy or psychological training that are going to be adjuncts to the gym. So the gym can be very helpful, I think, psychologically, in terms of like self-regulation skills, for example, can be really useful. But it's not going to replace trauma therapy. Interestingly, I knew a keto black belt who did trauma therapy and then stopped training because they got rid of that feeling of being unsafe that they had in the world that they were trying to make up for. So if that happens, number 3, we do need to look at our deeper motivations for training. Let's look at why we're training and be honest with that and check that, you know, our training is in service to our actual values rather than being a travesty. Lastly, and most importantly here, subscribing helps with your psychological strength. So if you're able to muster the emotional courage to hit that subscribe, please do.